Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. Ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy Thursday morning, November the 2nd. I about said 3rd. I'm jumping way too ahead of myself. To you and viewers, you're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. Drew Hickens on the other side of the glass, as always, pushing the buttons and making things work. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Good World Series game last night. That was not quite as epic as a couple of those other games, but that was a decently fitting into that series. And, of course, congratulations to the Houston Astros on winning their first ever World Series title and what was, God, one of the best series of all time. And I'll come back to that in a second. But for right now, man, it just seemed like whatever Los Angeles did in that game last night, however they tried to scratch and claw their way back, they just couldn't. They did everything they could, and they just couldn't get on the board.
Yeah, I was just waiting for them to come back at some point, to be honest with you. They left 10 people on, so they had their opportunities. It was kind of like Houston in Game 6, where Houston had all these guys left on base, and you just figured it would come back and bite them. But, yeah, they could never really get anything going. And props to that Astros. I guess I shouldn't say bullpen, because they used a lot of their they used some starters, but, I mean, Peacock as well. Morton came in and pitched great. I think he might have gone 4. Went 4 innings, 1 run, 2 hits, I think. Really, really well. Springer obviously won the MVP, as he should. He had 5 home runs in the series. It was just a really good series. I thought if it was a dramatic Game 7, it would really because that's what people remember going into the offseason. I'm interested to see how most people see it stacking up to the 2016 World Series, just because 2016 had that crazy Game 7. But this series probably overall a more competitive series, a better series maybe. I don't know. It's tough to say.
2016 was the better storyline between the Cubs and the Indians, and 2017 was the better series of games, I guess, is the way of looking at that. But anyway, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, or streaming over your phone, the WTSM app, the TuneIn Radio app, all there for you. Podcast, iTunes Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, YouTube, all those different places that you can find our show. We thank you so much for doing that. Of course, rate and subscribe if you can. It helps us out and it helps you. Radio@warchant.com is your email address. @WakeUpWarChant is your Twitter account. Renegade Express tomorrow, so make sure you're getting your stuff in there or on the Tribal Council. And then, of course, we can't get this thing going without our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central, Township, all right there in the heart of College Town. We were at Township last night. Had a good little time watching the World Series. But overall, we got to move on. And the reason I feel like baseball is important to bring up is, well, as you probably know if you've listened to this show for any while, I am a long-suffering Tigers fan. Drew is a long-suffering Mets fan. And there just comes a certain point in the playoffs, Drew, I'm sure you felt it before too, where just that certain game comes up. It could be the wild card round. It could be the divisional. It could be whenever. But that game that comes up and you just think to yourself, that just existential feeling of dread of no matter what happens tonight, you're not going to win this game. You've probably experienced that before. Am I putting words in your mouth, or am I right? As a fan, have you ever experienced that game where you just woke up that morning and you just went, oh, God, there's no way?
I mean, I guess. I think just for me as a baseball fan, I love watching playoff baseball. But, watching another team win the World Series, especially when the Mets were so close 2 years ago, always makes me feel a little sad. But, I mean, at this point, I'm so used to it because we just haven't won one since 1986. And I was not born, so I have not experienced that anyways. And that's what I was talking about that with somebody the other day. It's so funny how sports work. You know, we all get gung-ho about all our teams every year. And every year, really, outside of, you know, maybe once out of every decade of your life, if you're lucky, but probably not even nearly that much, your team actually wins the whole thing. So really, in reality, every year it ends with despair because your team's just not going to win. So I think that's kind of funny when we talk about sports and how into it we all are. Unless you're an Alabama fan, your team's just not winning something every year, or at least even has a chance to every year. So I just think that's something that's kind of funny to look at. But yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. But or you know, when I'm watching Daniel Murphy hit 350 for the Nationals, and he was my favorite Mets player, and we let him go. But again, that's not something that was his fault. So.
Well, the only reason I bring that up is because I feel like we've kind of hit that moment with FSU football in that, you know, I'm trying to wrap my brain around, gosh, Florida State's more talented than Syracuse. Florida State should beat Syracuse. It's a home game. Florida State's got to eventually win a home game. And I keep thinking to myself, well, there's got to be a way, right? And yet, deep down, I can't help but escape that we're going to lose feeling. Oh, my gosh, they're going to lose this game feeling. No matter what I do, no matter what I think, I cannot justify in my brain thinking, well, if Florida State does this and Florida State does this, they're going to win this game. I cannot believe we've reached that point with Florida State football. And it's been 9 years. It's been since probably 2009 that I could sit back here and I could look at a game against somebody like Syracuse, and I could say, yeah, I'm just not so sure about this.
Yeah, I will say, I feel like just because we all think that there's no chance that we'll win, you know, they'll probably come out and look all right. I felt worse about the Boston College game than I do this one, just because now I've conceded. You know, I've given up thinking that they're going to turn this corner. I just don't see it anymore. I think you obviously saw the Boston College game where, you know, just a culmination of the entire season came out, and it's just kind of done. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll come out with some fire and beat Syracuse. I sure as hell don't know. This team makes no sense to me anyway, so it wouldn't shock me if they came out and did something like that. That being said, I'm with you on that. I do not see that happening. But it's to the point now where I would like to get bowl eligible. I don't expect it. It's almost going to be unfortunate if you go on to win this game because you already know what's coming next. They're going to come out next week and say we're rescheduling the ULM game, which is embarrassing. But you got to do what you got to do, I guess. And it's another week of practice for your young team. So especially if you don't make a bowl.
The thing is, and not to cut you off there, but if you win this game and then you come out on Monday and say we're playing ULM the Saturday after Florida, you better hope you win every game not named Clemson. Because if you don't, you're not bowl eligible anyway. And then, guess what? You're going to be playing that game for win number 4, win number 5 in front of God knows how many people. You might operate that game at a loss, depending on the ticket sales and depending on who goes in. I mean, I know people who have season tickets already have theirs, but how many people are really going to come to that stadium and really going to buy food or drink and really going to put money into the Tallahassee economy? That could literally be, fingers crossed, you're just putting it on Watch ESPN or something like that.
It won't be a loss. I mean, you won't operate at a loss money-wise because at the end of the day, you still have all those season tickets out there, 1. 2,
fair enough.
People will still, you know, by no means will it be a good crowd, but people will go because it'll be the last time you can go watch your team in Doak for, 6 months. Granted, again, not a lot of people are really going to care about watching that team in Doak or going to come from out of town or anything, but there's still the students and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, the students are coming for games now. What makes you think they're going to come for one ULM, which would probably, that would probably be finals week.
Oh, well, would it be finals week? No, I think it would be right before finals week.
First week of December? Anyway, you get what I'm trying to say here. If they're not coming for Louisville, what in God's name makes you think they're coming for
Just
ULM?
because it would be a home game and be the last home game. People get all gung-ho about their home games, so at least students do, and I think maybe if that's, the last one in 6 months, maybe they would go. I don't know. I mean, I would go. I'll say that. I would go torture myself for 2 or 3 hours. Why not?
Well, anyway, and I know that's not a big substance to take at the beginning of the show, but I just felt like I had to say it. This is the first time, and I think that's so perfect for this program, or for the first time since this coaching staff was completely different, and for the first time since Florida State was really in shambles at the end of the last decade. I can't do it. I can't bring myself to think that there's a legit shot that Florida State comes out and plays with fire and intensity.
I'm not going to say there's not a legit shot they can win the football game, just because at the end of the day, it is Syracuse. I don't think they'll win, but I think there's a chance. There's definitely
was Boston College.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm just saying. I thought there was a chance they could have won that football game too, but obviously I was wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say there's no chance Florida State wins on Saturday. I'm just not going to say that they're the better team. Do I think they'll win? No, I wouldn't put money on them to win, but there's definitely a chance. It's still Syracuse at home. I'm not gonna.
You know what that line is right now?
I think it's 5 for Florida State, which is ridiculous. But.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway, Florida State does want to win. It's going to have its younger wide receiver step up. Somebody's got to make a play to a certain extent, because Auden Tate told us on Tuesday, and Irish Fell's got a good piece about it right now on warchant.com, that he's being double covered pretty much all the time. Safeties are coming in. Boston College most certainly covered him just about every single play, which was smart. Take away the consistent weapon, force the other guys to go. Nyquan Murray, welcome to the call-out zone again. Need you, pal. Need you big time. Need G.J. Matthews to be a part of this offense. Need a couple different guys to be a part of this offense, because Auden Tate has 5 games with a touchdown to start the year, and then the last 2, he doesn't have one. He hasn't scored since that first possession against Duke, according to Ira, which, yikes, your best offensive weapon needs to find the football.
Well, that's because, James Blackman for a long period of time was pretty much only targeting him. So take him away, and what is he going to do? I feel like that's how a lot of defenses more than likely feel. Not to mention, we all know how banged up he is. He goes out there time and time again, pretty hurt. So, but yeah, it's not surprising if you watch film on Florida State and James Blackman. The NC State game, you probably win the game if he doesn't get hurt, to be honest with you, just because he was he was catching balls at will.
He was rolling, yeah.
So when you watch film and you see Blackman's numbers if you look at Blackman's numbers when targeting Auden Tate versus everybody else, I guarantee you it's not even close. So I feel like that's more than likely what's happened.
There was a piece that we didn't really get a chance to talk about that Ira put out. Ira's been doing really good work this week about how Florida State isn't worried about Blackman's struggles, that they're not worried about the issues and stuff like that. And I think that's a debate worth having, not because we don't think he can get better, because he's a true freshman running a complicated offense. But my worry for James Blackman isn't necessarily that. My worry for James Blackman is sometimes when guys play earlier than they should, in college, in the league, heck, even in high school, they can get shell-shocked. They end up chasing ghosts. They end up, just because they've been under fire, they don't always respond well to it later. And with a wide receiver situation as putrid as it is, with an offensive line that fails to guard you, and then after you get knocked on your butt, doesn't want to pick you up off the ground, I just wonder mentally where this season's going to leave James Blackman. And, of course, we can't talk to him. Of course, that's a Florida State policy. So I feel like I'd have probably a little bit more insight if we could. But you got to wonder, because I don't care how resilient you are, when you take a beating like that, plus you don't have the receiver help, it's got to be a situation where you just got to think to yourself, what is going on? No, despite anything I tried to do, nothing's working. And that's not to pin it all on everybody else. James Blackman has some throws that he has to have back. James Blackman has to stop turning the ball over sometimes in key, crucial moments. Sometimes you just got to learn, listen, getting knocked on your butt's not fun, but sometimes you just have to take that sack. But considering everything that's going on around him, I just wonder what this season's going to do for his state of mind moving forward beyond this season. It is what it is. But yikes. For Florida State, it is what it is. I don't know what to. I'm literally sitting here and I don't know what to tell you because we've just kind of reached that point in the season. Syracuse, man. It's Syracuse. Nothing against Eric Dungy. Nothing against Dino Babers. They're Syracuse. You're Florida State. You shouldn't be talking about a game like this Wednesday before and thinking about it in these terms. Let's get you caught up on some sports ball, shall we? This is Why You're Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning. Wake up. Wake up. Wake me up. Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
All right. We already talked about the World Series. Of course, the Houston Astros, your champions. Let's talk about the NBA, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Where don't look now, but somehow the Orlando Magic are 6-2. Number one versus number one last night. The Grizzlies are the number one in the West. Orlando, number one in the East. The Magic end up winning that game 101-99. A big three-pointer from Aaron Gordon late in this game. It's the difference. The Hornets over the Bucks 126-121. Pacers beat the Cavs in Cleveland 124-107. Cleveland has not looked good to start the year. They're only 3-5. Meanwhile, the Pacers are 5-3 on the season. Sixers beat the Hawks 119-109. Suns over the Wizards in Washington 122-116. Celtics 86 over Sacramento. The Heat beat the Bulls 97-91. Rockets in New York get a win over the Knicks 119-97. Timberwolves go to New Orleans, get a win 104-98. Nuggets at home 129-111. That's their final score over the Toronto Raptors. Utah gets a win at home over Portland 112-103. And finally, the Clippers beat the Mavs 119-98. Real quick in the National Hockey League, it's the Maple Leafs beating the Ducks at home 3-1. Blackhawks shut out the Flyers at the Madhouse 3-0. Pens over the Oilers 3-2. Devils over the Canucks 2-0. And finally, the Sharks beat Nashville 4-1 at the Tank. We got a little bit more to talk about, and then our own Michael Langston is going to join us to chit-chat a little about recruiting on Wake Up 4 Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio. Chat time here on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table. And of course, anytime we talk recruiting, it's the senior recruiting analyst of warchant.com who's on deck, Mr. Michael Langston. Michael, how are you, sir?
I'm pretty good, man.
Hey, first of all, I know you had your recruiting chat last night, and for maybe those who don't have access to the premium recruiting board, what's kind of the atmosphere? What are the type of questions that you're getting right now in terms of recruiting? Does it have a lot to do with what's going on with Florida State on the field and coaching changes and stuff of that nature, or are people really just more locked in on Florida State's targets? Where is the pulse of the fan base right now?
Well, I think majority of it is, the coaching changes and, what's going to happen with that and how it impacts their recruiting. But there's specific recruiting questions about where they stand with this guy and, and that guy and, how things would impact if you got, new coaches and, say there was a upgrade as far as the coaches, just the type of impact it would have in recruiting and, those kind of questions mainly. But a lot of it's mainly based around, what kind of impact would the coaching changes have?
And, you mentioned it right off the bat, what type of impact the coaching changes have. And one of the guys who's immediately brought to mind when you talk about guys who might be on the chopping block at this season, no pun intended with that, of course, is Rick Trickett, the offensive line coach. And it looks like there's some guys for whom that seems to be a big deal, and for other folks seem to be having second thoughts about Florida State, of course, in two different classes on that offensive line. But let's start with Trey Hill, the number 2 offensive guard in the country. It doesn't seem to really be affecting him much. He still has FSU high on his list.
Yeah, I think it still affects him. I mean, I think we're not going to know the complete effect until, assuming it happens or it doesn't. But he certainly has a good relationship with Coach Trickett. So, there's a lot of these guys that have great relationships with Coach Trickett, but at the same time, say you do make a change, they might bring somebody in that they already know that they have a bond with, and they know they already love FSU. So the impact might be minimal, or it might be where they start looking around and taking visits, or maybe taking a return visit to see how they feel about FSU again with a new coach. So there's a lot of variables, but I would say if there was a position coach, the biggest impact it would be him, because his relationships are very personable and the kids love him. But at the same time, a lot depends on, because a lot of times you'll have, a kid fall in love with a certain school, and coach leaves, and he's close to him. But then if you bring somebody in that they feel comfortable with, the comfort oversees that stuff. But, it just depends on how big of an impact it has on a kid.
Speaking of guys who may be having an impact from, I know our friend Chad Simmons from Inside the Rivals Network gave a brief update this week about Wanya Morris, who's a 2019 offensive lineman who maybe seems to be wavering a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. And I think a lot of the guys are, I don't want to say everybody's wavering, but I would say, some of them are wavering because, I think they want to see, one, what's going to happen, and then two, who's going to be brought in. It kind of falls in that question where if you get somebody that they already have a bond with, previous coaches that recruited them, for those guys, the minimal of Trickett possibly leaving is not going to have a tremendous impact. Now, if you get somebody that's just brand new that they don't have a relationship with, that's when it gets really hairy, where you're talking about decommitments and, you got some work to do. But that's kind of what you need to focus on as far as, when we get to that point, or if we get to that point, that's what you got to look for.
All right, Michael, a bit of a rewind with some of the stuff. I know you put together your Friday night rewinds. A certain wide receiver from that Valdosta area had himself a nice little weekend last week.
Yeah, Tayshawn Kane, he's a very good player, a guy I like a lot. Went out there and saw him in probably the best, I would say, the high school game I've seen in a long time. I mean, this kid had a good game. They kind of use him a little bit everywhere. He mainly plays receiver and defensive back for him. Most teams like him, I think, on the offensive side of the ball as a receiver. But they use him in a lot of different ways. Use him as a wildcat. Use him as pass on a trick play. Does a little bit of everything. Everyone's asking me, who'd you compare him to? I was like, well, the guy I watched out of high school that was similar to him, and I'm not saying he's him, but he reminds me some of Rashad Green when I watch him play. He's very smooth on his routes, catches the ball really well, snatches the ball out of the air out of his hands really well, and does have breakaway speed, like Rashad does. He's very smooth in his routes, and that's the one thing, Rashad was always good at high school, college, and we always saw that. So he's a guy that I think is very, underrated. I don't think a lot of people know about him. I think Purdue's kind of the team that's in the best position, but he did tell me if FSU pushed, it's certainly a game changer. And I got the impression that if FSU pushed, they would be tough to beat. But this kind of falls back in the uncertainty with coaches where, if Dossie's not there, it depends on who else you get and who else goes after him. If they still feel the same way, because I know I've heard that FSU likes this kid a lot. I've heard that, Jimbo likes this kid. So I got a feeling that they will push at some point, but that also falls in the category, with the coaching coaching situation.
You know, when Jimbo Fisher took that job in 2010, he had a chance to really kind of salvage a recruiting class, and he ended up turning it into one of the, I believe, a top 10 class, if I'm not mistaken, in 2010. This almost seems like if some of the changes are as drastic as you hear through the rumor mill as they might be, it's one of those things where this almost kind of feels like this, where it's almost like it's a brand new head coach. It's almost like it's a brand new administration, because when you change all those assistants and you change all those relationships, even if Florida State gets high quality guys, it's going to be somewhat of a scramble to establish new relationships unless Jimbo Fisher's recruiting them personally or one of the guys that's going to be staying on staff's recruiting them personally. It just kind of seems like it's a reset button. And you're right, Michael, there's only so much you can say right now because so much isn't clear about what's going to be of this Florida State program in a couple months.
Yeah, and that's a very good example, Ryan. I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people forget about that, no offense to Coach Bowden, was doing a lot of patchwork to keep that stuff together. Bobby was at the end of his career where Jimbo was basically doing all the head coaching responsibility. So he was putting all the stuff together, plus he had coaching changes that he was making, and this isn't his first rodeo. So that's a comforting thing for FSU fans to know that he's been through this. He knows if you are making these massive coaching changes where it's going to be multiple guys, he knows how to handle that stuff, and I'm sure once they know something, they're certainly going to, I'm sure they've let the recruits know kind of where things are and honest about, just where things are at. So it is challenging, but at the same time, like I said, they're wavering and maybe even have some decommitments, but you also, with the new guys, if you do add new guys, you add new guys that might have relationships with kids, first of all, with the same kids you're recruiting, but also new targets that they're very close with that might have an impact. So it sways both sides of the pendulum. And, I've always said, and I've told people in the chat, we just had this week that, I could see a top, 15, top 20, but I could see it already go up to, around 11 or 12, maybe even higher than that, depending on how things swing. Like the bottom line, as I'm trying to make it clear to people, it's like, we're not going to know anything until these changes happen. And then I think right after that happens, you're going to see a lot of momentum go. I think you'll see a lot of momentum pick up. I think there'll be clarity as far as the program. And it's the same thing that Jimbo had to go through in 2010. There wasn't a lot of clarity. Yes, he was the head coach, but you still didn't have clarity about who's going to be assistant coach, who's going to be there, who's going to be your defense coordinator, who's going to be your position coach. I mean, who's going to be there? So the same stuff that he had to go through then, he's going to go through now. And so I think that's a really good example you brought up.
One big old holding pattern, Michael. That's certainly one way to put it. Thanks as always for joining us, my friend.
You got it, man.
All right, we're putting a bonnet after this. It's Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Baby, do you understand me now? Sometimes I feel a little mad.
Darn pop-ups and video ads.
Are you wasting your time again on clickbait FSU updates that are bloated down with ads?
Yeah. And after crashing my computer, the information isn't even up to date. You're on warchant.com. What's really going on with the Seminoles?
For the real scoop, you'll need to get your own War Chant subscription.
What's it cost?
Free. There's a 30-day trial offer right now.
You know I like free. Sign me up.
Use the promo code WARCHANT30. That's WARCHANT30. Nobody has more accurate and timely information on the Noles than warchant.com.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Big story in college football yesterday was that we now know where we're going to be playing the national championship for quite some time. The College Football Playoff Association said on Wednesday where they will be playing the 2021 through 2024 college football playoff games. 2021, Miami, Florida, of course, at Hard Rock Stadium. 2022, that's going to be at Lucas Oil in Indianapolis. 2023, the brand new stadium that's being built for the Rams in Los Angeles. And Houston is going to host the 2024 national championship in NRG Stadium. Plenty of big names, plenty of familiar places, and also a place that gives you something regional. Miami gives you the ACC and the SEC a place to go. Indianapolis gives the Big Ten a place to go. LA obviously accommodates the Pac-12, and Houston obviously accommodates the Big 12. We sure about Indianapolis in January, though? Are we for sure about this one? Because, I mean, here's the thing about the old bowl system. Here's the thing about the old BCS. It was how it was for a reason. And bowl games are where they are for a reason. Because no one wants to be in Indianapolis in January. People want to be in Miami. People want to be at the Rose Bowl. People want to be in Texas. People want to be in Arizona. Nobody wants to be up there in January. Nobody.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is obviously they'll be able to close the roof. But still, yeah, you don't exactly want to go take your vacation, go watch your team play in Indianapolis. That being said, I will be more than happy to do so because that would mean that we were in the national title game. I would love to be in Indianapolis during that time. But yeah, that's an interesting location. You would think they would go for, you know, like you said, the BCS Bowls, Arizona, Miami, places like that would make more sense. But I mean, I'm sure they have a better understanding of it than I do, so I'm here for it, I guess.
And if I'm not mistaken, Houston will be the first time that we will play a college football national championship in a place where there is no major bowl game. There's no bowl game in Indianapolis. At least I don't think there is, unless I'm going. There are a lot of bowls now. They're hard to keep track of, but I'm pretty sure there's not a bowl there, is there? Can you think of one? I know there's one in Los Angeles. I know there's one in Miami. I know there's one in Houston. As a matter of fact, all three of those host rather large, high-profile bowl games. But, you know, once again, I think it's a good thing that it gets kept regionally. But the thing is, then it becomes interesting because it's almost like the Super Bowl in that when do you win winning in a year where you're close to the Super Bowl and you have that home field. I mean, if you're the Seahawks, you don't want to go to the Super Bowl necessarily in a year where you're playing in Miami compared to a year where you might be playing in San Francisco. Of course, you'll always take a trip to the Super Bowl, but it's not always the easiest thing to do. Anyway, that being said, there's plenty of headlines going on in college football this weekend. Have you seen the story that Tennessee may have played a kid concussed? And if that is the case, my God, Butch, what are we doing here? Yikes. He ends up issuing a statement saying that he'd never put a student-athlete in harm's way, kind of saying what he has to do. But the reports have ended up surfacing all week now, and it's a website called The Read Optional. So the credibility there is what it is. I mean, I don't know a lot about it. I've never even heard of it. I know they're a part of the Medium blog network, so take that as you will. But they reported that offensive lineman Brett Kendrick played at least 2 quarters of the last game against Kentucky with a concussion. And the report states that the Tennessee staff knew about it and continued to let him play. And here's the thing. This could be true. This could be not true. This could be whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you know what, Tennessee? This probably isn't a story if Butch doesn't have his job. You've literally, I would say since that first week of October, since you got pummeled by Georgia in, what was it, week 4 or week 5, it's been on you since then. Since that game, it's literally been on you that Butch has a job, that your alumni is really upset. And these stories are going to keep coming out as long as there's unrest about the guy at the helm of this program.
Yeah, it's just interesting from a program who likes to claim so much that they're at this elite level that a lot of these other top teams are at, and then they let stuff like this go on, where Butch Jones, like you said, still has a job, and things like this are surfacing, whether or not true or not. Again, it's out there, so there's probably some issues in the way that things are being run over there. It wouldn't shock me one bit. I'm not making any accusations. However, again, there's one thing we can all agree on, and that's that Butch should not have a job. And if you want to claim that you're on this elite level, you can't let somebody with that kind of performance continue to keep their job. I mean, look at Florida. Florida couldn't wait to get Jim McElwain out the door, and he's won the last 2 SEC East titles. Granted, it was a terrible SEC East, but I guarantee you if Butch Jones had won the last 2 SEC East titles, Tennessee wouldn't even be thinking about getting rid of him. So, and yeah, Florida got rid of him because of the death threats and whatnot, supposedly. But there was a huge rift between him and the him in the school and everybody else in Gainesville, and they couldn't. It was obvious in Strickland's statement saying, well, this wasn't just about wins and losses, that there obviously was an issue there, and they were happy to oblige him with letting him walk, and they also saved themselves quite a bit of money. So Tennessee could learn a thing or two from Florida.
Well, Florida found their excuse and they jumped on it. To me, you know what this reeks of? Even if it's something that's not true, this reeks of your excuse to get rid of Butch. This is it. The fact that someone would even entertain that idea. Even if it's not true, this is one of those, we take the health of our student athletes very seriously type press releases in the middle of the night where you can wash your hands of this guy. What are you doing going to bat for this dude that's made you look like a clown for the last half decade?
Yeah, but how much steam does this story really have at this point? Like, who are those people that you said broke the story?
Well, College Football Talk is who picked up on that.
Okay.
So that's NBC Sports.
Okay. I was going to say, I mean, obviously if it's just some blog, I mean, it's not something they really need to worry about. But, I mean, if it's getting to more mainstream, then obviously that's something they should probably address.
So it's just hard to justify any of what's going on in the volunteer program right now. Updated odds to win the national championship right now. Well, how about this? You could have, at the beginning of the season, put a ticket for 1,000 to 1 odds for UCF to win the national title. It's jumped all the way to 100 to 1. Obviously, that's not even close to the best odds. You got about 15 guys in front of you. But even then, it's one heck of a ticket if some weird stuff happens. Don't give me that look. I said if some weird stuff happens. Come on.
Some impossible stuff happens. UCF's not winning the national title.
It's not impossible.
It's impossible.
I do think it's so funny that one of the reasons we supposedly made this playoff was to give guys some group of fivers and stuff like that a chance to get in, like the Boise's of the world. Because remember, that was the big argument around 2010 or so. Well, if we had a playoff, Boise'd have their chance. And now we look at it and we're like, yeah, nobody outside the Power Five has any chance ever of being in one of these.
Yeah, I mean... Again, if that's something where, you go and extend it to 6 to 8 teams, which I don't think they should do, maybe 6, definitely not 8. They're not going to get in. Unless you go 12-0 and you schedule like 2 out of conference big dogs and you blow out the rest of the teams on your schedule, there's just no way, because it's clear the committee cares so much about who you play and who you beat. When you're a Power 5 school and your best win is against Memphis, you're not getting in. I mean, point blank, end of story.
Well, I just wonder if stuff does go south and Central Florida's on the outside looking in, how much are they kicking themselves for canceling that Georgia Tech game?
I'm not even sure that Central Florida, if they won out, would be a top 10 team. They're all the way back at 18 right now, I think.
Once again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just playing what ifs with worst case scenario.
Right. No, I'm just saying, like, I don't even think a Georgia Tech win and them going undefeated would push them into the playoff picture.
They beat Georgia Tech by 4 touchdowns.
How much respect does the committee really have for Georgia Tech, a team who lost to Tennessee?
I don't know. I'm not in that room.
Not much. Spoiler, not much.
By the way, obviously, in case you're shocked, the best odds to win the national championship, the Alabama Crimson Tide, who opened at 3-1 in preseason, who've moved to 2-3 odds to win the title. Ohio State's jumped from 8-1 to 3-1. Clemson's jumped from 20-1 to 8-1. Georgia 30-1 jumped to 12-1. Notre Dame, it's not a bad bet if you put down on them at the beginning of the season. 60-1 odds, now 12-1 odds for the Fighting Irish. Penn State moved from 25-1 to 20-1. Oklahoma, one of the biggest fallers, 8-1 to 25-1, outside of course, Florida State. I wonder, Florida State's not even on the list. Are you kidding me? The field moved from 1,001 to 2,001. So pretty much the usual suspects. A lot of folks you expect to be up on this list. Two of the biggest falls from grace, though. USC went from 8-1 to 200-1. Michigan, 12-1, 200-1. But none can even come close to Florida State. I would love to know just what a bookkeeper right now, what would a bookie give me on odds for 2-5 Florida State to win a national championship? I'm assuming I wouldn't get them. That's all I'm saying. I'd just love to actually run the numbers of the probability of what it would take for that to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't think he would do that.
No, he wouldn't.
But B, if he were, I mean, it would be the easiest money ever made in the history of ever.
Yeah, I'll take the field, Haas.
Yeah, so.
All right, we're putting a ball on it after this. It's Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Electric word, life, it means forever, and that's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you, there's something else.
Stupid to send you on your way on Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio. By the way, segment 2, when I interviewed Michael, I may or may not have said we're going to put a bow on it after this, and we didn't. We had to play them out of order. Just a weird thing came up today, but just wanted to let you know I wasn't crazy. We were planning on running that in the third segment. But anyway, before we get all done, in a place called... Let me make sure I get this right. How about this? Let's just go with the county. Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office here at Mediterranean, Louisiana. I think that's right. How about this? Quote, according to NOLA.com, a woman wielding a can of pepper spray sent patrons at a Chuck E. Cheese scrambling Sunday evening. This, by the way, October 29th, when she, quote unquote, indiscriminately blasted the nearby crowd during an altercation. According to the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office, authorities arrested 24-year-old Kataria Marshall of the 11,000 block of Guilford Road, New Orleans, and booked her with disturbing the peace by fighting, said a spokesperson for the department. Who in God's name goes to a Chuck E. Cheese to get in an altercation and let pepper spray fly in the stinking Chuck E. Cheese? Pepper spray? Really? Listen, if you got to throw hands at the Chuck E. Cheese... listen, if some other parent's giving you lip, something like that, sure. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying I may understand where you're coming from. May on a real outside shot. But if you're just going to take out some pepper spray and start whipping it around at Chuck E. Cheese, no. Especially when 5 adults and 2 kids, according to the report, have to be treated on scene because you maced them. Imagine going to Chuck E. Cheese and getting maced. Imagine you're going there for like a little cousin's birthday or a niece or a nephew's birthday. Someone just whips out the mace and shh. People are stupid, man. People are absolutely stupid. Oh, boy. Anyway, we're just about out on this one. Thanks to Michael for joining us. I'm interested to see how our recruiting conversations go from here on out because, as Michael mentioned, it's a lot of wait and see. There's only so much you can say. There's only so much you can talk. I mean, it's hard enough to break down the mind of a 17-year-old who's being told how great they are on Twitter and in the hallway and at practice every day anyway. But just imagine that with a program that commands as much respect as Florida State, but at the same time with the idea that who's going to be coaching there in the next couple months? Crazy. Anyway, my thanks to you, Drew.
Thank you.
Thanks to you guys for listening. Mike and Mike's up next. 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.